So this is Danny Flexen here for Seconds Out, one of the founders of SJM Boxing, Adam Morallee. Adam, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Danny. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Obviously, one of the big stories of last year was your co-founder, good friend, Sam Jones, moving on, now taking up a position, of course, with Pro Bellum.
Yeah.
Since then, you've had a bit of time to bed into the new scenario now. How has your day-to-day kind of changed?
It's changed a little bit, I guess. Shane Watson is probably more kind of task orientated, if I put it that way. Does a lot of work that I was doing. He's obviously like everything in life, there's like pluses and minuses. You know, when you lose Sam, you lose a huge energy, a promotional ability. Just everyone knew him, and he could promote a boxer for a management company. He could help us promote a boxer in a way that was almost like management and promotion together. I think we've lost that with Sam now, but you know, on the other side, when you're doing that, you don't do a lot of kind of, whatever you want to call it, boring grunt work. Not that Sam was lazy, just he was more focused elsewhere. So yeah, it's taken a little bit of workload off me, to be honest.
Oh, good stuff. Happy for you. From that kind of promotional aspect that you talked about, that being a minus of Sam leaving, have you kind of filled that void at all, either yourself or Shane or anything like that?
Oh yeah, I mean, listen, Shane's starting to talk more, starting to get interviewed more, starting to make a name for himself a bit more, but he's not, you know, at Sam's level at the moment. But there's also the question of, when you look at management companies generally, I mean, look, I think one thing Sam did terrifically well was with Joe Joyce. You know, when Joe started off, he's a naturally kind of quiet guy. But then now Joe's kind of matured. I think it's the right time for Joe to go out there, spread his wings and kind of be himself. And I think sometimes when you're Joe, when you're around someone like Sam, who's quite loud, you might become naturally quite quiet. So I do think there is a question for a management company as to how much of a promoter you should be and how much you should let the boxers speak for themselves. But that said, having a Sam is always a positive.
And all of the fighters that you had when Sam moved on, are they all still with you, or has anyone kind of said, you know, we're very close to Sam, we'd rather consider our options?
No, they've all stayed, all very happy. I think they all understand it was a career move, a big decision for Sam. But from them, you know, their experience and their day-to-day has hopefully stayed the same or got better, actually.
And are you actively looking to grow the stable any further?
Not really, if I'm honest. We have a lot of approaches, as I'm sure a lot of management companies do. We have a lot of approaches. But at the moment, we have kind of boxers like, say, Joe Joyce, Lerone Richards, who are, you know, at the world level, really, at the top end. And then other boxers coming through like Tommy Fletcher. And we try and just give everyone lots of attention. I think it's really hard to do that when you go, we got 10. I think when you go above 15, 20, it becomes really difficult. Like we want one of me or Shane at everyone's fight, and really, preferably both of us. So it is very difficult to give a personal service when you get above 10.
Is that, do you want them to be on the same cards as much as possible, so you get a bit of free time, a bit of family time?
No. That's not really a consideration. I mean, international. We had at the end of last year, we had Darius Fulgham fight in Mexico City on the Thursday, and Shane managed to make that and then come back for Lerone Richards against Gongora on the Saturday in Manchester. So we had like a lot going on in a short space of time. But yeah, it's about when you manage fighters like Darius Fulgham, Guido Vianello, Guido Simon top rank, Darius with Pro Bellum, but should be fighting in the States next. That's when it starts to get a little bit kind of complicated. And then Joe's based himself out in Vegas now with Salas. So there's a lot of international travel. It's international travel that takes up the time. I think if you've got a fighter fighting Friday, Saturday, so whatever, it's fine if it's in England.
You need a private jet.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're kind of, 1,000 fighters off that, probably.
Only 1,000. Let's talk about Joe Joyce. He's obviously coming back from a wrist injury, looking to get back out in the early part of this year. There was some talk recently, I think, from Joseph Parker's team, that you guys, whether you or Frank Warren or some members of Joe's team had reached out to them about a possible clash. How much can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, what David said is correct. I've spoken to David. I think when he's talking about reaching out, the people he's actually talking about are the Warrens, because obviously they control, how much he's going to get paid, something like that. But yeah, it's a fight we like very much. It's WBO #1 versus WBO #2. I think it's a great test for Joe. I think the public will really perceive it as a 50-50 fight. I think it is a really, really, really compelling fight for people to watch. And it's a fight that, as Joe's manager, I want him to be in these kind of challenging fights. As a manager, you can sit here and say, right, Joe's #1 with the WBO. Why don't we sit here and wait? Just sit here and wait, because something will happen with Usyk and Joshua at some point. And we can press the mandatory and we can wait. But, with everything going on with Fury, Whyte, who even knows if that's certain? Joshua, Usyk, no one said anything about reactivating the rematch clause. I don't think Joe's in the position to just sit and wait. So we want to make big fights for him. But having said that, so many of the top heavyweights have been caught up in this Joshua, Whyte, Fury, Usyk situation. Yeah, that it's hard to pick a fight off. But I spoke with David when he was over in December, when he had Parker against Chisora. Good guy. We're both on the same page. I really hope we can get something done. But ultimately, it's about money, isn't it?
But percentage-wise, how close are you, do you think, or how confident are you that it takes place?
No, probably over 50%, but not a lot over 50%.
Fair enough. We saw Florian Marcoux recently signed a new deal with Sky and Boxer. Do you just tell us how you kind of came to that conclusion? I know Matchroom were obviously interested. He's fought on their shows recently. Why Sky and Boxer this time around?
Yeah, look, we've got 4 boxers with Matchroom, one of the best promotional outfits out there, like the DAZN platform a lot as well. And so did Florian. I think with Florian, it really is a question of like horses for courses. I think Sky do have a pay-per-view platform, and I can sit here and talk to you, and people might think I'm delusional that Florian Marcoux a pay-per-view fighter, but I think he is. And I think having that platform is important, and that was ultimately the thing that was very appealing to Florian. It was ultimately his choice, but he has the capability out of all of our stable. He's probably the best talker. He can get people riled. People want to see him. Having worked with David Haye, the thing I know is that you get pay-per-view if people want to see you knock people out, or if people want to see you get knocked out. That's what it's all about. And I think Florian has a large proportion of both. He has a huge Albanian fan base and a very large proportion of people that probably want to see him get knocked out because he's such a talker. So in short, the pay-per-view possibilities are there. And I think we've got kind of a nice pathway and a plan we've talked about to getting Florian there.
And Lerone Richards, who we touched on earlier, how close is he to getting a shot at one of those big 4 world titles? I know he won the IBO last time out, but I know he also wants to challenge for one of the, I guess, traditional 4 world belts.
Yeah, so Lerone, we're looking at governing bodies. Lerone's ranked in a couple of the governing bodies. I think the IBF is a governing body that we think is good for him to target. I think Lerone's one of those fighters where he is so good that when people look at him as an opponent, the risk reward doesn't seem brilliant to them. We just beat Gongora, who risk reward, isn't brilliant for anyone, right? Knocked out Ali Akhmedov, very, very difficult, awkward fighter, but Lerone took him on. Lerone will, everyone says they'll take on anyone, but Lerone will. He just wants to be given the opportunity to get there. So Lerone's going to have to play the game of going up the ladder, get to #1, get his mandatory shot, and then as a world champion, I think his riches will come. Having said that, he is, I know the IBO is perceived by some to be a lesser world title. I think that's fair, very fair to say. But he may well want to defend that title. And I see Felix Sturm's in a final eliminator for that title. And so, as a champion, he respects the belt and he might want to defend it. But I think we've got that as an option, and also talking to Matchroom very closely about, progressing up that IBF ranking.
Good stuff. Now, we briefly mentioned Tyson Fury, Dillian Whyte earlier. A lot of people talking about that at the moment. You're a lawyer, so I'm hoping you might be able to give us a kind of lawyer's perspective on events, because apparently Whyte was predominantly represented by his own lawyer during the negotiations just leading up to the purse bid. What do you kind of make of everything going on? And what would a lawyer do in that situation? Like, what would their role be?
Okay, so in relation to the question, what would their role be? I mean, obviously, I still am a lawyer and have acted for many years as a lawyer. It is different to a manager's role. I think that you are focusing on a lot of these legal aspects of deals. So you're looking at the fine print of deals, rematch clauses, explaining to everyone the consequences of certain clauses. But really, I mean, his lawyer was probably acting as a manager in that situation, probably getting into negotiations about purse splits. As I understand it from publicly available information, what happened was Dillian Whyte has an arbitration with the WBC, and I believe the subject of it is to do with what his purse split is and what his purse split should be. The WBC have made a ruling that it should be 80-20, and then I saw that they've got this kind of strange equation where it's split 80-20, and then the winner gets an extra what, 4, 5, 6 million, something like that. I think they've done that perhaps as a sop to Dillian Whyte to try and get him to drop his arbitration. But then, you know, if Dillian Whyte goes forward with that arbitration and wins it, then will Tyson Fury be happy with taking the fight with a different purse split? So I can't shed too much light on what's going on now. I'm imagining the likelihood is probably Dillian Whyte is going to try his hand in arbitration, hopefully get a quick result, and then hopefully be able to make a move straight after that. But right now he's keeping quiet, isn't he?
If the WBC hold firm and arbitration rules in their favour at 80-20, if you were Dillian Whyte's manager, what would you be advising him to do? Because there's a certain amount of reputational damage involved in walking away from a world title shot because he's done it in the past against AJ. I think rightly on that occasion, because he's built himself into a bigger attraction now. But the flip side of that is you want to get paid what you're worth. So at what point does one outweigh the other?
I think there comes a point for any fighter where you have to look at the fight itself and say, I need to be paid properly for this fight on a risk reward. And that's what every manager's looking at every stage. But then there comes a point when you take the fight because you believe you can win the fight, and you take the fight for the benefit after him. It's a big game of snakes and ladders, isn't it? How big is this ladder for Dillian? I mean, if he beats Tyson Fury, it's just the most enormous ladder. He becomes pretty much the best heavyweight in the world overnight. So there's such a huge prize there, and it's all about how much you believe in yourself. If you're going into that fight believing you're going to lose, and I'm not saying he is or he isn't, then you want to extract maximum cash from it, don't you? Because you're thinking, after this fight, I'm going to have lost, and where am I going to be? But then, having said that, I think the heavyweight division's in a place where you lose and it doesn't matter. For some people, you know, Chisora loses, it doesn't matter. He still goes on and his purses increase. Whyte loses, he's still he's got so many fights out there. The Joyce fight is still good for him. He can still fight Joshua again. He can fight Wilder. He can fight Ruiz. So I don't know. If I was Dillian Whyte's manager, I'd want him to take that fight at 80-20. Just too much to win.
Yeah, I agree. But you're a manager, so it's better to get it from your perspective than mine.
Yeah.
Really appreciate your time. I know you don't do loads of these, but it's always insightful, and you should do more of them. You're very articulate and knowledgeable. So.
Cheers, Danny.